The NHRA has witnessed legends behind the wheel. World champions dominating the sport, Tony Schumacher with his record 8 titles, Brittany Force breaking barriers, Doug Kalitta chasing his dream, Gary Seltze's fire, Larry Dixon's consistency. Rebels who bent rules, drivers who lived for that split-second reaction, icons who gripped the wheel and etched their names into drag racing history. But one man? His name alone on the entry sheet sent a ripple through the NHRA tower. Officials would tense up, radios crackling a little louder, eyes scanning the pit wall before a single run even happened. He never sat in the cockpit. He stood there, arms crossed, eyes sharp, that quiet, knowing half-smile that said everything without a word. Drivers chase glory with speed and guts. The real fear? It came from the mastermind who didn't drive. He outthought the entire rulebook, the inspectors, the competition. This isn't another driver's story. This is the story of real power, the silent, invisible force that controls the chaos from the pits. The story of a crew chief the NHRA feared more than any driver on the track. Rapid montage, rulebook pages turning furiously, tech inspectors measuring parts with calipers, subtle nod from the pit wall, then a massive bass drop as the screen fades to black with flames lingering. Meet Alan Johnson, the undisputed king of top fuel tuning. With over 16 NHRA World Championships, 12 in top fuel alone, as crew chief, team owner, manager, or consultant across 7 different drivers, he's the most successful mind in the sport's history. He delivered 5 straight titles to Tony Schumacher, 2004 to 2008, back-to-back wins with Gary Seltze, 1997 to 1998, the 2000 title with Seltze again, Larry Dixon in 2002, Sean Langdon in 2013, Brittany Force in 2017, and Doug Kalitta's breakthrough 2023 championship. Different drivers, different teams. Same unstoppable result. Dominance so complete it forced the NHRA to rethink the rules time and time again. His secret? Not just horsepower, but precision engineering, clutch mastery, nitro mixtures dialed to perfection, starting around 87 to 90% nitromethane for the edge, and setups so razor-sharp the car looks legal, but performs like nothing else on the planet. Who he really was. While the drivers soak up the spotlight, roaring down the quarter-mile with flames and thunder, the real boss never needed a microphone or a hero pose. Alan Johnson was the quiet architect standing at the pit wall, the one who turned the raw violence of 11,000 plus horsepower into something precise, repeatable, and terrifyingly dominant. He wasn't there for fame, he was there to win by outthinking everyone else. His name shows up far more often in the fine print of NHRA rule changes than in post-race interviews. Johnson didn't chase headlines. He chased perfection in the invisible details that separate good from unbeatable. Engine timing was locked into the millisecond, squeezing every ounce of cylinder pressure without grenading the top end. Fuel curves were mapped with surgical accuracy, blending nitromethane percentages, typically starting in the 87 to 90% range, cut with methanol for control and consistency, so the engine delivered peak power without detonation or excessive wear. His clutch setups became the stuff of legend, multi-disc packs engineered for exact slip rates, progressive engagement, and even pioneering techniques like the push start, where the crew gently shoved the car forward between rounds to reduce clutch wear, a subtle edge that many teams still copy today. Every part he touched looked perfectly legal when the tech inspectors tore it apart on the table. The measurements checked out, the tolerances were within spec, the car passed. But the moment that green light flashed and the tires hooked, the difference became obvious. The car didn't just run fast, it ran smarter. Razor-sharp 60-foot times, flawless reaction to changing track conditions, and a power delivery so smooth it hid the brutal violence happening under the hood. Through his company, Alan Johnson Performance Engineering, AJP, he supplied cylinder heads, blocks, and critical components to many of the top teams in the sport, including some of his direct competitors. That meant rivals were often racing with his hardware, yet still getting outrun by the cars he personally tuned and set up. That is the mark of the true invisible boss, the man who beats the field with brains, precision, and an almost unfair understanding of physics, tolerances, and variables, better than the people who write the rules themselves. And that's precisely why, whenever his name appeared on an entry list, the entire NHRA felt the shift in the air. Why feared him? The NHRA has never been afraid of fast drivers. They expect champions to push the envelope, break records, and light up the scoreboard. What keeps officials awake at night is the rare mind that understands the rulebook better than the people who wrote it, and then quietly exploits every gray area without ever crossing the red line. That was Alan Johnson. He didn't need drama or loud arguments in the tech shed. He didn't have to yell at inspectors or file protests. He simply built cars that were so perfectly optimized that they danced right on the edge of legal, yet delivered performance no one else could touch. The moment his team's name appeared on the ladder, the NHRA knew Monday morning would bring another closed-door rule meeting. Because whenever Johnson dominated, the rule writers had to react. He saw loopholes before the ink dried on new regulations. He anticipated how track conditions, temperature, humidity, and tire compounds would interact with his setups. His teams ran consistent elapsed times that looked almost too clean, because the power delivery was that controlled. Inspectors would tear apart the engine, measure every clearance, check every gasket, and walk away frustrated. Everything was within spec. Yet the car would drop another tenth or two on the competition. The fear wasn't about cheating. It was about genius that made cheating unnecessary. Johnson's dominance forced the NHRA to evolve the sport's technical landscape. Adjustments to maximum nitromethane percentages, dropping from 90% plus to tighter limits in certain eras to curb runaway power. Stricter clutch regulations and engagement curve restrictions after his multi-stage clutch innovations made launches too repeatable and violent. Changes to supercharger overdrive limits, blower restraints, and even body rules, all quietly traced back to cars that performed too well under his hands. Officials never said his name in press releases. They didn't have to. Paddock whispers were enough. That new rule? That's the Johnson rule. He didn't just win races. He made the sanctioning body change the game to keep up with him. That is power without a spotlight, silent, surgical, and unstoppable. The mind games. When the NHRA tech inspectors started walking toward the Kalita or Schumacher pits during a big event, the energy shifted before they even reached the trailer. Everyone knew who was standing at the wall. Alan Johnson didn't pace, didn't bark orders, didn't throw tools or raise his voice. He just stood there, arms folded, eyes scanning the track or the data board, that quiet, laid-back half-smile on his face that seemed to say, "Go ahead, look. You won't find anything." And that smile was the real weapon. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence born from knowing every clearance, every tolerance, every variable had been triple-checked and dialed in days before. Officials would swarm the car after a killer run, pulling plugs, measuring blower restraints, checking clutch packs, flipping through the rulebook like they were hunting for a hidden bomb. They'd find nothing out of spec. The car passed, every time. But the tension lingered because deep down, they knew the performance they just witnessed was too clean, too repeatable, too dominant for it to be ordinary. Johnson never argued. He never yelled. He answered questions politely, offered data when asked, and let the results do the talking. His demeanor was intense yet laid back, a perfect balance that unnerved people more than any outburst could. Competitors whispered about it in the paddock. "He's too calm. Something's up." Inspectors walked away frustrated, not because they caught him, but because they couldn't. The car looked legal, ran legal, passed legal, yet it left everyone else in the dust. Those mind games weren't loud or confrontational. They were psychological. Every flawless pass forced the NHRA to question their own rules. Every win added pressure to the tower. If we don't tighten something, this guy will keep winning forever. Officials knew that come Monday, another rule discussion would be on the table, not because of cheating, but because genius had once again exposed a gap no one else saw. Johnson understood power doesn't come from noise or drama. It comes from control. From preparation so thorough that doubt is the only thing left for the other side. He never had to prove he was smarter. He just kept winning, and the sport kept reacting. That quiet presence at the pit wall, that knowing smile, became the stuff of legend, the calm before the storm that never quite broke, but always left the competition wondering what they'd missed. In the high-stakes world of top fuel, where one bad tune-up can end a weekend, Johnson's teams rarely had bad weekends. And when the green light flashed and his car hooked up perfectly again, the message was clear without a single word. The game was already won before the run even started. Drivers were replaceable, he was not. In the brutal, high-turnover world of NHRA top fuel racing, drivers come and go like seasons. A hot shoe might dominate for a year or two, then fade under pressure, get injured, retire, or simply move on to another team chasing better funding or a fresh start. Teams swap pilots mid-season, legends retire, rookies rise, and the cycle never stops. Yet through every driver change, every team shuffle, one constant remained unbreakable. When Alan Johnson was involved, the wins kept coming. Look at the resume and the pattern is undeniable. In the late 1990s, he tuned Gary Seltze to back-to-back Top Fuel World Championships in 1997 and 1998 with the Joe Gibbs Racing team. When Seltze moved on and the team restructured, Johnson stayed, and in 2000 he delivered another title to Seltze in a different setup. Then came the Don Schumacher Racing dynasty. Johnson took over tuning duties and turned Tony Schumacher into an absolute monster. 5 consecutive world championships from 2004 to 2008, a record streak that still stands as one of the most dominant runs in drag racing history. Schumacher himself has said repeatedly that Johnson's tuning was the difference maker. The car felt alive, the power was always there when needed, and the consistency was otherworldly. After that era ended, Johnson didn't fade away. He adapted. He consulted, supplied parts through AJP, and stepped back into full crew chief roles when called. In 2013, he helped Sean Langdon capture the championship with Kalitta Motorsports. In 2017, he tuned Brittany Force to her first title, proving he could make a female driver a champion in a sport long dominated by men. And most recently, in 2023, he was instrumental in Doug Kalitta finally breaking through for his long-awaited first world championship after decades of near misses. That's 7 different drivers: Seltze, Schumacher, Langdon, Force, Kalitta, and others in supporting roles, across multiple teams, multiple engine builders, multiple sponsorship eras. The only common thread? Alan Johnson. Cars changed. Chassis were updated. Rules tightened. Budgets fluctuated. Drivers rotated in and out like parts on a pit stop. But whenever his name was attached to the program, success followed. Teams that struggled for years suddenly started winning rounds, dropping elapsed times, and climbing point standings. Competitors would watch in frustration as another Johnson car hooked up perfectly and left them behind. The NHRA learned a hard truth. You can suspend a driver for a rules violation. You can fine a team owner. You can even bench a crew for a weekend. But how do you stop the mind that designs the setup, maps the fuel curve, engineers the clutch slip, and anticipates every track change before it happens? You don't. That's why, in the paddock, the saying became gospel: fire the driver if you want. But if Alan's still there, good luck. His value wasn't in driving the car. It was in making the car drive itself to victory, lap after lap, round after round, season after season. Drivers were the public face, the ones who strapped in and took the risk. But Johnson was the irreplaceable core. Teams knew it. Rivals knew it. And the sanctioning body knew it most of all. Because no matter who sat in the seat, the result was the same: dominance. Rules changed because of him. The NHRA doesn't like to admit it publicly, but the paddock has always known the truth, and the history books quietly confirm it. When a single crew chief's teams dominate too completely, when cars run laps around the competition with performances that are suspiciously perfect, consistent, repeatable, and edge of the envelope without ever quite crossing into disqualification territory, the rulebook inevitably has to catch up. For more than 3 decades, Alan Johnson's fingerprints have been all over those quiet evolutions. Officially, the sanctioning body never pointed fingers or issued statements naming him. They didn't have to. The changes themselves became the evidence, and the whispers in the trailers, tech sheds, and hospitality areas were unanimous. That one's the Johnson rule. His influence on the technical landscape began early and built relentlessly. In the early 1990s, Johnson and his brother Blaine dominated Top Alcohol Dragster with 4 straight championships and 26 national event wins, pushing the class to new levels of performance that drew attention and helped shape how the NHRA approached engine development and safety in nitro categories. But it was Johnson's move to Top Fuel that turned the pressure into a constant force. Starting in the late 1990s with Gary Seltze's back-to-back titles in 1997 and 1998, plus another in 2000, the pattern emerged: flawless launches, razor-sharp 60-foot times, and power delivery that left competitors scrambling. Then came the Don Schumacher Racing era, where Johnson tuned Tony Schumacher to an unprecedented 5 consecutive world championships from 2004 to 2008. In that final year alone, they won 15 of 24 national events, a dominance so overwhelming that it forced the NHRA to react on multiple fronts. The most visible responses targeted the raw power Johnson mastered so well. In 2000, the NHRA had already capped nitromethane at a maximum of 90%, with the balance mostly methanol, following a wave of explosive engine failures in 1999 that highlighted the dangers of higher concentrations. Johnson's teams excelled within those limits, often blending around 87 to 90% nitromethane for optimal control, peak cylinder pressure, and minimal detonation, dialing the fuel curve so precisely that the engine produced maximum horsepower without the violent side effects others suffered. Then, after the tragic 2004 fatality of Darrell Russell at Gateway International Raceway, the NHRA dropped the cap to 85% in an attempt to reduce overall power and risk. Teams, including Johnson's, immediately reported issues: more mechanical failures, oil downs, inconsistent performance, and higher costs from parts breakage. The complaints were widespread, but Johnson's setups had already proven how to extract superior results at higher percentages, making the restriction feel like a direct response to the untouchable edge his cars displayed. By 2008, the cap returned to 90%, where it has largely remained, with the current rule since 2015 allowing up to 90% maximum, non-mandatory, for better consistency and safety. Beyond fuel, Johnson's innovations in clutch technology created ripple effects that reshaped regulations. His multi-stage clutch packs, with precisely engineered slip curves and progressive engagement, made launches violently quick yet controllable, delivering consistent 60-foot times that turned races into foregone conclusions. These setups were so effective that the NHRA introduced stricter regulations on clutch operation, including tighter controls on engagement parameters, timer restrictions, and monitoring to prevent excessive aggression that could lead to tire shake or safety issues. The push-start technique, where crew members gently shoved the car forward between rounds to reduce clutch wear and heat buildup, was a subtle but game-changing practice Johnson helped pioneer and popularize. What started as a smart workaround in his pits quickly spread across the field, becoming standard procedure. The NHRA watched it closely, ensuring it didn't evolve into an unfair advantage, and it influenced how teams managed between-round maintenance under the accelerated TV schedules. Even engine architecture felt his shadow. Through Alan Johnson Performance Engineering (AJP), he supplied cylinder heads, blocks, and components to much of the top fuel grid, including direct rivals. Yet his personal tuning always extracted that extra tenth or two. When the NHRA allowed larger intake valves in top fuel heads around 2011 to 2012 to promote parity and power gains across the class, AJP quickly developed the Stage 7 design, mastering the new tolerances and pushing performance further. This cycle repeated. Innovation leads to excellence, excellence leads to dominance, dominance leads to rule tightening. These weren't cases of cheating. Johnson's cars never failed tech inspection. Every measurement, clearance, gasket, and component passed muster. The frustration for officials and rivals came from the fact that the cars performed too well while staying perfectly legal. They exposed gaps in the regulations that no one else had seen or exploited with such surgical precision. Supercharger overdrive limits, blower restraints, body rules, and ongoing clutch and ignition monitoring, all tightened over the 2000s and 2010s, carried the quiet legacy of cars that were simply too good under one man's command. The pattern became undeniable: win too much, win too convincingly, with different drivers across different teams, and the rule writers returned to their drawing boards. Paddock veterans didn't need official confirmation. They saw the new restrictions roll out after Johnson's streaks, after championships with Seltzy, Schumacher, Dixon, 2010, Worsham, 2011, Langdon, 2013, Force, 2017, and later Khalida, 2023 and beyond, and they knew. That new rule? That's for Alan. He never bragged about forcing change. He didn't have to. The rulebook itself became his silent testimony, a living document that evolved because one mind understood the physics, the tolerances, the variables, and the gray areas better than anyone. Johnson didn't break the system. He out-engineered it so thoroughly that the system had no choice but to rewrite itself, time and time again, just to stay in the fight. In the end, that's the ultimate mark of real power in racing. Not the trophies you collect, but the rules you make everyone else live by. Long after the final round of any season ends, when the trailers are packed and the nitro smell fades from the air, the real story of drag racing isn't told through trophy counts or driver names alone. It lives in the rulebook that still bears the quiet fingerprints of the man who forced it to evolve. Alan Johnson never sought the microphone, the victory lane burnouts, or the endless interviews. He didn't need them. His legacy isn't measured in headlines. It's measured in how the entire sport had to change to keep up with what he created. Today, when NHRA insiders talk about the toughest, most restrictive rules in top fuel history, the lowered nitromethane caps, the ultra-precise blower restraints, the clutch engagement limits, the supercharger overdrive restrictions, the ongoing battles over cylinder head designs, they rarely mention a single driver by name. They talk about eras, about safety, about parity. But everyone in the know understands the subtext. Those rules weren't born in a vacuum. They were reactions. Reactions to cars that were too fast, too consistent, too dominant under one particular set of hands. Johnson's influence stretches across decades. He helped build the foundation for modern top fuel tuning in the 1990s with Gary Seltze's back-to-back titles. He defined an entire dynasty in the 2000s with Tony Schumacher's 5 straight championships. He proved his magic wasn't tied to one driver or one team when he guided Sean Langdon, Brittany Force, and finally Doug Kalitta to their own world championships in different eras. 7 different drivers, multiple teams, countless chassis, engine builders, and sponsorship changes. Yet the outcome remained the same: victory. Over 16 NHRA World Championships tied to his name in various roles: crew chief, tuner, consultant, parts supplier. 12 of those in Top Fuel alone. That's not luck. That's mastery. His company, Alan Johnson Performance Engineering (AJP), still supplies cylinder heads, blocks, and critical components to teams across the class, meaning even today, many of his rivals race with hardware he designed. Yet the cars he personally tunes still find that extra edge. The push-start technique he helped popularize is now standard procedure. The fuel curve philosophies he refined, starting around 87 to 90% nitromethane with perfect methanol blend for control and power, are still the benchmark. The clutch mastery that made launches repeatable and violent without grenading parts set the standard that forced the NHRA to write tighter controls. What makes his legacy truly unique isn't just the wins. It's the respect mixed with quiet fear that lingers in the paddock. Drivers get celebrated for bravery and reaction time. Team owners get praised for funding. But when old-timers sit around and talk about the golden era of top fuel dominance, they speak of Alan Johnson the way chess masters speak of a grandmaster who changed the game forever. He didn't break rules. He exposed them. He didn't cheat the system. He out-engineered it so thoroughly that the system had to rewrite itself. This is why, even in 2025, with new generations of tuners rising and technology advancing, the shadow remains. When a new restriction drops, when a rule clarification arrives mid-season, when officials tighten tolerances yet again, the paddock still murmurs the same thing: that's got Alan's name on it. He never needed the spotlight to prove his power. The spotlight moved because of him. This isn't a story about fame. This isn't a story about drivers or burnouts or victory laps. This is the story of real power, the kind that stands at the pit wall, arms folded, smile subtle, and quietly forces the entire sport to bend to its will. And decades later, it still does. So there you have it. This wasn't just the story of a crew chief. This was the story of real power, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't pose for cameras, doesn't need victory lane interviews. The kind that stands quietly at the wall, arms folded, and forces the entire sport to rewrite its rules just to stay in the game. Alan Johnson didn't chase fame. He chased perfection, and the NHRA spent decades trying to catch up. If this story hit you the way it hits every true drag racing fan, the thrill of genius outsmarting the system, the respect for silent dominance, the goosebumps from knowing one man could bend an entire sport to his will, then don't just watch. Hit that like button if you respect the invisible bosses who make legends possible. Drop a comment below. Who do you think is the next Johnson-level mind in NHRA? Or tell me your favorite moment from his era. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're diving deeper into the hidden stories, the tech secrets, the paddock legends that the mainstream glosses over. Next up, more untold tales from the Nitro world. Real power doesn't ask for attention, but it always gets respect. Thanks for watching. Now go out there and appreciate the minds behind the machines.